Hello and welcome to Unwarranted Music Opinions, the show in which three music nerds very forcefully and aggressively shove music into each other's ears. Eventually, opinions are formed and we just splatter them back out at each other. I'm June Lindberg, here with Brian Courtney.
I hate it.
And Chaz Jenkins.
What up? I have nothing to say.
And
I have nothing to add.
That's like usually the greeting is like, hey, or what up, or something like that. And today's episode is just whatever the heck we wanted to choose. And I believe we are kicking things off with Brian.
It wasn't whatever we want to choose, June. Actually, it was a sequels episode, but you know.
Was it a sequels? Oh.
Yes. So it's a sequels
episode. This was a sequels episode. No, we're not starting shit over. It's a sequels episode. We're choosing albums by artists that we've already talked about at least once on the show.
Either future or past albums.
That bit was funny once. And that was because you didn't realize what you were saying. And then you keep doing it. And it's like no one gets it anymore.
So I picked a past album. We did Anna von Hausswolff's, what's it called? We did her most recent one.
All Thoughts Fly.
All Thoughts Fly, you fake fucking fan.
I think it's All Thoughts Fly. And we did that one, mostly organ-driven, drone and ambient kind of record. And then run it back, do the one that blew her up, Dead Magic. It's most popular record, most acclaimed.
The bolded pick. The bolded pick.
It has the most eyes on it. It's definitely not like the one that we listened to first. It's actually way more different than I remembered. I hadn't listened to this album since it came out. It's got some almost like post-rock passages in it. The songs are more dynamic in their arrangements. There's definitely more passages and movements they kind of go through. And the record has this kind of momentum as it careens towards the end where things chill out as we go on. Like a lot of the most impactful songs are kind of in the first leg. And then as we kind of coast out on the last two songs, which are just mostly solo organ pieces. But like the middle track, Ugly and Vengeful, is like this, like at some points it's like a total rager with these just massive guitars. And I didn't know there were drums on this album. Like I didn't remember a lot about this album. So going back was kind of like hearing it for the first time.
It was really fun going back to this album because it was one of my favorite albums in the year that it came out. And I haven't listened to this, in the past couple years. So it was fun to go back and listen to this and also be like, wow, 2018 had some awesome freaking albums.
It was a great year. That was the year I started listening to new music too.
That's the year that this show started. I mean, fuck yeah, dude.
Not only is it like a great year for music, but the amount of variety was amazing too. Like in the midst of like, I think that Daughters record and like what's some other stuff people really liked that year. Like Kids See Ghosts was that year.
Billie Eilish, no, that was 2019. That was 2019.
Sophie album
was
came
2018.
Out.
Yeah,
and then you also had stuff like that was like the Voids record, which was
Shy Girls
good.
EP, Cruel Practice came out then too.
2018 was a fantastic year for music. This is definitely one of the things that when I revisit it though, kind of had grown off me a little bit. And I think it was because I just appreciated the direction she went in way more with All Thoughts Fly. I just found it to be more fascinating and gratifying. This album is like a completely different animal. Like it's, one, there are vocals on it and her vocals are like these yelping, really,
so killer.
Like
so
not to the
killer.
degree of volatility and just like emotional wreckage that like a Diamanda Gallis has, but still in that same very high yelpy register, kind of howling and vibrating along with the other instruments that are happening. It's really, at some points it is really encapsulating. It's just not a sound that I'm super into right now. It's not a sound I dislike in general, but it was one of those weeks where I was kind of listening to it and I was like, I'm not in the mood for this music right now, but there were still parts of it that were so good that I did kind of get sucked in a little bit. This is maybe one of the most different releases from 2018 that sticks out like a sore thumb. I hate to compare it to another huge album in the genre, but like it's like how Caligula is like this album in 2019 that gets a lot of praise and is unlike anything else from that year. It's a really totally unique record, which I love a lot. There's not a lot of places you can go to get a sound like this, and the way that she takes it as well with the organs and the drums and the the guitars and the long passages, it is I don't know, there's not a lot of albums like this that I've heard anyway. And her voice is another element that just adds such a unique layer to it. It's very gothic in its vibes too. There kind of is a lot to talk about, and it's mostly in the soundscapes, which are the most fascinating part of the record to me. I didn't really dig through any lyrical tropes or anything like that, just because I'm just trying to pick apart all the droning and winding and again, like vibrating sounds that are going on. But I think I cared more for the record that comes after this, which is maybe I'm sure Chaz maybe feels that way about it, but that's me and Chaz are probably in the minority here, is what I'm trying to say with that opinion. I think people really love Dead Magic because it's so bold and loud and kind of epic, whereas the next album is more meditative, and I think people are attracted to that kind of epic scale. I don't know. I guess the last thing I'll say is I find that the passages I called on here on post-rock, we've been kind of hard on post-rock on the show a little bit, rightfully so.
Crescendo core.
I think the way it's done here, this is like the most fascinating way to do post-rock to me, is to kind of have these passages that can still be kind of like cathartic and epic in scale, but really it should be about trying to evoke something other than just like 52 minutes of a drum loop building up to the crash cymbal kind of thing.
This album earns the crescendos that it has. I wouldn't dare call it crescendo core because, look at the way it's structured. The louder songs are kind of in the beginning, but the last two tracks are primarily organ and are a little more drony, a little more ambient. And
it's literally the blueprint to what her next album would be. I disagree with your take. I disagree with your take, Brian, that like there's not elements of All Thoughts Fly on here. It really is in those last two tracks where you see why she would go to just an all organ album. Right off the bat, All Thoughts Fly is better. Let's just get it out of the way. My opinion is All Thoughts Fly is better. Now, why is that? I also wanted to mention that there's some ethereal wave going on here, which the last time we talked about ethereal wave was
probably
Cocteau Twins.
Oh, yeah.
I think the ethereal wave adds so much to the atmosphere of this album in the drone moments. I think it really gives this a distinct character. The compositions are awesome. Yeah, a bit of a post-rocky vibe within the drone. They're just awesome. I don't know what it is about neoclassical dark wave, but that's like the quickest way to just get on my good side. I guess that's a genre I just really dig. It's fucking awesome. It has to have like a really cool female lead who's mad about something with some form of an orchestral instrument, whether it's a piano or a violin,
just like something that has strings in it somewhere, as part of the like the machinations.
And they're just mad, and it's kind of operatic, and we get that a little bit here. But I don't want to compare Lingua Ignota and Anna too much, but they're really the only two neoclassical darkwave artists we've talked about. And I think we had a discussion, it was kind of a gag, but it was a legit discussion of like, well, how do you compare two neoclassical darkwave? It's like, well, I guess it's what they're great at. So for Lingua, it's singing. Anna, it's all about the keys.
That's always been, and we kind of had this happen on the show. It's like a point of, I don't want to say contention necessarily, but like, it's okay to draw parallels between these artists under a genre that is kind of
pretty niche.
Like the thing is, like, there's not a lot of comparisons to draw. I don't want to sidetrack us, but I do want to say, like, there was a conversation going on in like a music forum where we were talking about like hyperpop and bubblegum bass, which is bubblegum bass was kind of like the tag that was used before hyperpop, and people were talking about like, well, what's the difference in trying to, it's one of those things where like, I think making that difference isn't the most important part. It's kind of just about trying to find the best umbrella term so that all these artists who are in this lane can kind of be defined together. So I feel like neoclassical darkwave is like a perfect one for that, to kind of describe the sounds that are going on. And also there's, like progenitors with this genre. So, those comparisons, drawing those parallels on its face isn't a bad thing, even though, you want to be careful to make sure to keep each artist unique.
Well, the point I'm getting at is like, which one does Chaz like more? Right now, I'm waiting for the Caligula review. It's coming. So I'll be able to definitively say which one I like better. Because right now, technically, once I give my score, if you were to take the average, Lingua's technically in the lead, but that's not fair because we haven't listened to her other album yet. Yeah, I really like the compositions. They're subtly changing, so that it always feels fresh, and you are rewarded for detailed listening, which I always like. I find that with music like this, you could turn your brain off or keep it on, and either way, you're going to get an enthralling experience. Anna's vocals are so awesome. The word I'm going to use is banshee here. It's just shrieking like a wraith or a siren, where it's just like if your wisdom modifier isn't strong enough, you're going to get fucking hypnotized.
Right.
And I can't compare Lingua and Anna's vocals because it's like two sides of the same coin, where, Anna's is shrieking and sporadic. Lingua's is more refined, regal, has a very like royalty feeling to it because it's very important what she's saying. The instrumentation production, I wrote down crispy. I didn't really know what other word to use because it's
You use that word a lot.
I do.
Crispy.
Me and my brother, it's like if you're crispy, you're good. If you're crusty, you're bad. That's kind of where I'm at right now. But I didn't know what word to use because it's like I just really like the production and instrumentation.
It's so epic. Yeah. That's what I like.
Yeah, epic's a good word. Epic's a really good word.
It's just got a lot of space. Like you can hear the space between the instruments, and that really helps when it's creating this scene or creating this atmosphere that you can get lost in.
Mm-hmm.
So, why do I think All Thoughts Fly is better? Something about this record, on my first listen, and I'll be 100% real with you guys, we were in 10 category. And we haven't been in that category since season 1. Like, I was going to come in here and be like, 10, it changed my life. But the more listens I gave it, I was just kind of like...
10, it changed my life.
I'm kind of just at the point where I'm like, this is a solid neoclassical darkwave album, but that's about it. There's nothing really here that's like blowing me away, and I think that's just because I'm spoiled from All Thoughts Fly. I don't have that emotional connection that I want to have from music like this. It just, when I listen to it, I'm like, man, this is kind of cool. Anna sounds badass on it. The playing's nice. The production, the etherealness of it really creates for a really cool listening experience. But when it's over, I'm just kind of like, okay, that was solid. Like I'm kind of at that point where I'm just like, this is a good album. I don't really know what else to say other than that.
I feel that
because with All Thoughts Fly, there not only was that emotional attachment to it, but there was like nostalgic. When I listen to that music, like I really feel something. But it's
once
nice
you get
to see,
tied to it that way, you're fucked. You know what I mean? Like that's it.
It was nice to see the blueprints of that. Because, I mean, Christ's sake, Marble Eye and the closing
track... That's like my favorite song.
...are
Marble
literally
Eye,
All Thoughts Fly B-sides. Like, really, when you think about it.
Dude, fuck that. That shit is like... It could have landed on that record. It'd have been right at home. Marble Eye, anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I think that she just gets... I don't know. I just find, like, the drone she went into to be more enthralling. I don't think it's as ambitious as this one. Like, this is quite the undertaking with way more instrumentation, these complicated passages. But I don't know, man. Something about that fucking... That fifth, I think this is her fourth record, Dead Magic. Something about that fucking fifth one, dude.
Well,
something
dude,
about
it's because,
Fly.
like,
I don't know.
It's all about the setting, too. It's live. It's played.
The thing is, too,
how it was played, where it was played. It just gives it so much more character. This just feels more like... I don't know. It's just
they're
nothing
both kind of transportative. Like, that's what I think. Like, I think All Thoughts Fly is a little more like I'm enraptured with it. But this one is very much like when I'm listening to it, like June was saying, with like you get like an idea of a setting in your mind, like it's in it, whether it's them in the studio or just like this vague atmosphere. I do think they're both transportative in a way. I still love this one. I still love Dead Magic.
I like it. I really did like it. It's just a shame that my feelings about it kind of dipped the more I listened to it.
Yeah.
Plus, listening to this thing was a fucking chore because every time I tried to listen to it, something happened to where like would like stop my listening of it, so I'd have to come back to it. I don't think I got one full listen of this fucking record the entire time before recording this episode. So maybe that doesn't help. But June, what do you think? I feel like me and Brian have been kind of blabbing a lot here.
I concur with all of your praises of this record. It was one of my favorites of the year when it came out. It's still one of my favorites of 2018. My love for it has plateaued. However, it's plateaued around like, I love this album. It's a great album. It's not a life-changing one for me, but it's still a fantastic record, instrumentally, in terms of the compositions, the vocals, just the atmosphere, the production. And it was super cool. Like, she didn't come out of nowhere. Like, she had some albums come out before this, but to have such a niche artist in such a niche genre just kind of pop into the music nerd sphere in 2018 was just like yet another gift that year gave us. Because it's like you could get through 2018. There was a ton of fantastic music, but, we just so happened to get one of the best neoclassical darkwave records since Dead Can Dance's 80s stuff. So that's kind of incredible.
I think the only thing last I want to mention before we give our scores is that I think lyrically I can see why she went into more instrumental. You want her vocals because they're some of the best things about it, but the things she's saying, reading through them, it's like there's like a blueprint for an idea here, but it's never explored at all, and I think that's a little disappointing.
Esoteric.
Yeah. It's just coming off of All Bitches Die that had a point. It's a little underwhelming. I think she really could have dug deeper if she was even trying to say something. If she was right here, like, Anna, what were you trying to say with Dead Magic?
I don't know. It might be more about capturing a feeling. Sometimes it's kind of that way.
That's true.
I couldn't tell you what it's about though, but that's not, like I said, that's not why I'm here for the lyrics anyway. Earnestly, I'd go with the Light Ape. It's an album that is very unique, very good.
Your score went up. Oh shit!
I think it deserves it. Did it go up? I don't remember what
it was a 7. It was a 7 beforehand.
I don't go through looking at all my RIM ratings all the time, so. But you know what I mean. It's in that range.
I'm gonna go with a strong 7. I really liked it. It was a very enjoyable listen. Just something needed to be there to really grab my attention a little bit more. But I mean, I can't wait for the Caligula review, because then it's going to be like, all right, who's better? Like, let's get down to business.
Let's go put him in a fucking boxing ring.
For real, with her organ and her vocals.
Mom will destroy your mom. All right, first of all.
Ooh. I will go with a decent 8. This is a really great record. Not a lot that I think is wrong with it. It's exciting. It's an album that I always enjoy whenever I throw it on. It's fantastic. So I decided to take it back to songwriter Beverly Glenn-Copeland. We covered one of his early albums, a self-titled record that came out in 1970. Not a super well-known folk and psychedelic folk type of album, but one that I latched onto immediately and thought was fantastic.
The internet sort of trudged it up, you know what I mean? It seems like.
I'm looking at the Rate Your Music page for that record right now. It's got 3.8 from like 430 ratings. I remember when I discovered that record, it had less than 100 ratings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of this has to do with the album that we're talking about today, which is Keyboard Fantasies.
It's ellipses. Keyboard Fantasies, ellipses. Get it right.
You should wait a couple of seconds before you say it and after you say it.
So Keyboard Fantasies was really the record that put Beverly Glenn-Copeland on the map. It was released on a cassette tape in 1986, and rather than being a folk record, it is a new age record. A little bit of ambient pop in there, a little bit of just straight up ambient. Kind of similar in some ways to the last album that I chose, which was Music for 9 Postcards by Hiroshi Yoshimura.
This one having vocals and lyrics on it, though.
Exactly.
And also that pop element kind of driving a lot of the, like,
a little bit.
It definitely infects the way that the passages go, right?
I think the story of his music reaching a wider audience can pretty much be told by this album not having a reissue between 1986, and then it was reissued again in 2017, and then reissued again. So that just shows how this record kind of blew up in internet nerd spheres. I'm not entirely sure how. I don't know if it was a YouTube core thing, whatever. And then people went back and listened to, thankfully, because it's really awesome, his first record or his second record, or I know he has one before it, but I haven't.
The self-titled. They went back to the self-titled.
The self-titled. So yeah, this album is completely different direction. Keyboard Fantasies cassette tape from 1986 with some relatively lo-fi. I'm sure that he was probably using some keyboard that a lot of people were using to get this sort of dreamy, new agey sound back in the mid 80s. I'm sure that this keyboard, whatever keyboard it was that he was using, has been used on countless new age records because it just has that sound. It just has that dreamy kind of vibe to it.
First off, Keyboard Fantasies better than the self-titled. All right, let's get that out of the way. Well, first to talk about the keyboard sound, I think that's definitely something we should start. The production, this is going to show my nerdy side. This is a dead ringer for MS-DOS music. Like, dead ass. The keyboard sound, if you were to throw on like any MS, like Sam and Max or fucking Indiana Jones, any like Lucasfilms MS-DOS games, the keyboard sound is a dead ringer. Like, it's literally that. It's 80s as fuck, which I absolutely love. Yet somehow this is a very timeless record. I can already tell it's just extremely timeless, and I think that's because of Beverly's vocals. If his vocals weren't on here, I would call this sound a little more dated than it. I mean, it's dated as shit, but his vocals were my favorite thing about the first one, the self-titled.
Real quick, as you mentioned musically, like where this sits in time, this feels at home in the 80s, but if you look at like the comments on Rate Your Music, and I think that they're kind of right when people are saying, hey, this kind of sounds like N64 era kind of synthesizer.
I'm gonna put my tinfoil hat on a little bit here, but this dead ass sounds like what would inspire Aphex Twin. Like, I know that's crazy, but think about some of these songs. You speed them up a little bit and add like a drum and bass beat behind them. Aphex Twin. I mean,
there is a little bit, like, I think I read on the Bandcamp page for this record where it kind of mentions that almost coincidentally, without attempting to do so, but this is a little less ambient than it is a little more new age progressive electronic, and it with the vocals and with some, there's like very, very rare and occasional like
basic drum pad,
right. It kind of has this early like techno kind of vibe.
Yes,
it was old like Detroit techno.
But what makes it even
crazier, I don't know a lot about early electronic music like that, but from what I've heard, like, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, but what's even crazier is that when Aphex Twin was recording his debut, he was recording that in the late 80s. So I don't know how late 80s. I don't know. I think this record came first. I would not be surprised if old
Richard D. James
himself had this cassette back in the day and was listening to it and
I wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't even necessarily have to be Richard D. James had the cassette of Keyboard Fantasies and was inspired by it. It could literally just be that they had the same equipment or really similar equipment.
That's a really good point. Getting that out of the way, tinfoil hat off, it's just more consistent. Let me retread what I didn't like about the self-titled. While the psychedelic folk and the compositions and the performances were great, there's just a lot of weird things about that record that just really made me scratch my head, and not in a good way. The fucking weird ass detuned dissonant guitar with the operatic singing, get that shit out of here. The weird ragtime chipmunk song before the closer, get it out of here. What is this doing here? This one though, so much more consistent. It has a clear sound from beginning to end with some beautiful vocals, beautiful lyrics, very timely, and just all the more, like, every choice feels purposeful. It doesn't feel like he's just kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks a little bit. He clearly had a vision here, and I really appreciate that. And what vision we have here, I mean, is beautiful and hypnotic. I love getting lost in this songwriting here. I mean, that opening track is so great. And again, it's Beverly's vocals. He's such a great vocalist. I love his voice. And yeah, while the lyrics are simple, they're so effective. I mean, welcome to spring, the summer rain, both young and old, like we are ever new. Just the some of those words and phrases are just really beautiful. Like, dance down the road. And it was crazy because on my last listen, I kind of forgot how the last track sounded. So when it started, I was like, I'm not really feeling this. Like, I don't remember, how does this go? And then the fucking vocals came in. I was like, oh shit, yeah, this song is awesome. I forgot about how great that closer is. So just all the more consistent and a better sound for Beverly. The new age is just a perfect fit for him. And I can see why he kind of went away from the folk. But I really wanted to know, I would love to know, if we could ever get an interview with him, that'd be bonkers. I would love to know.
That would be wonderful. I would love to speak.
My
with
first
Beverly
question would be,
Glenn-Copeland.
what the fuck happened in the 70s to 80s? Like, when did you get your hands on a keyboard and go, oh, I can do something with this?
Well, here's the thing. I think that it makes sense when you consider the new agey types, the hippie new agey types from the 60s and early 70s, or listening and playing psychedelic music. What kind of music were they doing in the 80s? New age music. That was like 80s new age hippies were the new 60s psychedelic hippies. Like,
Right.
it's kind of, you can, like, I think that a lot of the people in the hippie movement, like, probably were new agey people
But
in the 80s.
I would love to know, like, because the distance between the self-titled and this one is a good chunk of years.
Yeah.
So I would love to know, like, what he was doing before he made this album.
16 years. It's 16 years. It's
it's
a long
likely
time.
just, not making any, the first record wasn't successful probably. So it was just, down to like just doing normal shit for a few years, just civilian shit, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
All right, Brian, be a bitch. Do your thing. You've been real quiet.
yeah.
Yeah.
Brian's got too dumb of a brain to appreciate. That was mean.
I don't know. I disagree with everything. I don't think it's more consistent. I mean, okay. It is a consistent sound. I like the fact that it's bookended by two songs with vocals. That kind of makes them the vocal performances stick out in my mind. I like both of those performances. I like the lyrics. But I don't like any of the loops at all. I find them to be extremely boring, mind-numbing. In fact, in the case of like the second and the third track.
And you have me, and I think that the loop of the second track, I think that Winter Astral might be my favorite song on the record.
I know. People seem to love that song.
I think Winter
don't
Astral's
get it.
the weakest one. I barely remember how that one sounds.
It doesn't have a vocal passage.
Well, even
but
without, Slow Dance and Old Melody, I could easily pick out. Slow Dance especially, it's got like this funky kind of groove to it.
So June was telling me...
Winter Astral is quiet and peaceful and nice, and it's just like the perfect music you could put on in the morning.
I will say each of the tracks are distinct too. Like there's not a moment that feels like another moment. And just I don't find any of these loops to at all be capturing or beautiful or anything. I just think they sound like keyboard loops. June was giving me a lot of guff this week leading up to this because she knew I didn't like it. And I was like, she was like, you can't just sit here and compare it to the first one because it's totally different. The thing is, like, I know they're totally different. And I know, but the thing is, like, okay, so I'm not against an artist choosing to go in a new direction. There are plenty of times on the show where I've liked that, or plenty of times just in my music listening, and as a hobby, I've liked that. But I just don't think there's anything interesting in this new direction. I think that you're correct in that it was like kind of predictive in a way, but it's so proto, like Aphex Twin and what you guys were proto drum and bass, that like it's just so rudimentary that I fail to both be fascinated or enjoy it.
You didn't like Aphex Twin either, really.
Not really.
Yeah, you haven't been hot on him.
Point.
Even when you liked Aphex Twin, you weren't really like blown away.
I wasn't super. Yeah. It's like a Jimi Hendrix situation where I'm like, I think this is good. Like, like I like this. Like this is definitely different from everything and is a step above everything, but I don't really love it. But this is just a case like I really fail to see what people love so much about this record, because now I'm going to compare it to the first one. The first one has so many more unique qualities. Beverly's ghostly vocal performances, the absolutely epic scale of some of the instrumentals like Ghost House, and is really the closer. The poetry on that first record is like, I mean, you don't really get a lot of lyrics that are kind of that, I guess, artsy or abstract that paint such a clear image as well, like more than just capturing a vibe, but are also giving you, these vignettes in your head almost. In a way, this record being so mediocre made me like the first one a lot more, because it just made me realize how many unique qualities Beverly really had as a songwriter, and how many unique qualities were in the musical arrangements.
I'm the exact opposite, because while there were some elements of the self-titled I like, this one is just everything I wanted that album to be. so much more consistent, not like definitely a more defined project, not random shit thrown in because why not? It just feels
the
way
thing
more.
is, like, I just feel like with the random thing critique, like, I just feel like the songs, just like on Keyboard Fantasies, you know, on Beverly Glenn-Copeland, each song is just really distinct. There's not a lot of bleeding together of similar sounds or melodies. Like Color of Anyhow and Israeli, you would never mix, or in Ghost House, those are like the 3 songs that stick out. You would never mistake those songs for one another.
This record is the same thing. I just think
I agree. Yeah. I just don't think that like this one has any qualities to capture me. I was so disappointed that only 2 songs had vocals because Beverly is such a talented poet.
I would agree.
And such an evocative lyricist. Like that to me fucking kneecap this record so hard because now it's relying totally on these instrumental palettes that do nothing for me. And it just destroyed this record so much so that on my 4th or 5th listen, I skipped tracks because I realized they just looped for like 3 minutes and I would just be over it so quickly. I was like, I know what's going to happen on this track and it's not interesting. And that happens with like over half the track list. It's just, for me, in the context of this show, going from like this, I was so excited for like an electronic direction. Like, what is Beverly going to do? Because these, and I don't know what limitations were on him necessarily, but these layers of like psychedelic and a ghostly production that were on the instruments and the arrangements on the first album were the thing I was looking forward to most seeing him do in an electronic environment. Now, I get that it's the 80s and this stuff, you know, I don't know necessarily how far along this stuff is, but you know, I know synth pop is really the only thing we're kind of getting as far as if that's correct.
Well, no, by 86, like even Kraftwerk
my lack of knowledge here it kind of works against me because like I don't know how far you could take this technology. Like that's something I've been trying to consider more as I listen to older music, but I don't know. It doesn't change the fact that I was totally disappointed by like the stripped down versions of these songs. Now, to be fair, when Beverly sings over them, it's kind of like, okay, now I can kind of get with this because I'm very interested in what he has to say, but he doesn't say anything for most of the record. So I don't know. I was massively let down by this. This is probably the most disappointing sequels we've done because all the qualities I liked about Beverly Glenn-Copeland are just gone on this record. It doesn't like feel like a totally different artist, but it just definitely feels like, I don't know, like a lack of creative direction.
Well,
all right, now
hold on.
Time for you to stop.
Real quickly, Brian, how do you think your opinion would be if you didn't hear the self-titled first?
Well, he would hate it. He wouldn't like it as much because he wouldn't care about it's Beverly Glenn-Copeland. I don't think.
I maybe would have been more fascinated by the brief periods that he spoke in on here because I would have been like, I would have thought he was maybe more mysterious because he doesn't talk too much. Maybe I would have thought his lyrics were more purposeful in that way.
But then you would have gone. That would have totally led you to the Beverly Glenn self-titled anyway. So yeah.
Well, I think if we listened to them in the order that we did, I think if I had heard this, I wouldn't have tried the first record. I'd have been like, I don't care. Like, even if it's a different sound, I just wouldn't have liked this enough. But if we had listened in reverse order, I'd still like the first one more, or the first one we listened to more, just because there's more to it that makes it more unique, in my opinion. Like, I agree with some of the unique qualities you all have pinned this with, like that it's kind of predictive in a way. You know, I think people like it because it maybe harkens to a simple electronic keyboard-driven sound, which seems popular now with like the Zoomies. But fucking bores me, frankly.
So Brian is dumb and has a big dum-dum poo-poo brain.
This is an attack.
And is too unga-bunga to understand.
I feel like I'm listening to a fucking Amy McGrath ad right now. You're just like, this person's really dumb. Are you smarter? They're kind of dumb.
So the one thing I want to mention is that we've all mentioned that there is variety on this record, and then we've also all mentioned that the number of instruments on this record is very, very low. And I think that's, in and of itself, to accomplish the variety that he's accomplished on this record with very limited instrumental palette is pretty impressive and adds a lot to the record. It's like he's getting as much as he can out of the synthesizer sound and these keyboard sounds. And
I would not be surprised
basic.
If literally when he was in the studio, he had one keyboard and one drum machine. I wouldn't even be, and just use the different sounds on the one keyboard and the drum machine, and that was it, and was able to create this record. I wouldn't even be surprised if that's how it was made.
I would not be surprised either. And I think that what he comes up with is so warm and cozy and nice and lovely and melodic but not obtrusive and calm but not stagnant. It's just a lovely little record, and it's this sound I've been more into like ambient stuff lately, because usually the only time I have to listen to music while I'm at work is in the morning before it gets too busy. And I'm tired in the morning and I'm still drinking my coffee, and I don't want to listen to metal or punk or anything like that. I want to listen to something quiet and soothing, nice. And this fits that bill perfectly, just as Music for 9 Postcards did last time. This album's fantastic. I'm going to give it a decent 8.
Same there. Decent 8. I like it a little bit more than Hiroshi with Music for 9 Postcards, simply because Beverly Glenn's vocals. God damn.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my week was ruined. I am legitimately feeling like a strong 4 to a life.
So, answer me this.
This is now the worst album June has made me listen to.
Wow.
And it's still like quadruple the score of the worst thing Jazz has been playing.
Well, I'm more adventurous with my. I'm not only afraid to go out of the box, but I'm also not afraid to destroy the box.
Hating things is just as fun as loving things sometimes.
Exactly.
Usually only in retrospect, though.
So the album I picked is the second and the sophomore release and only other release from sludge metal legends Acid Bath. This is their album released in 1996, Paegan Terrorism Tactics.
Louisiana, let's go.
So, bring it back. First discussion of Acid Bath, When the Kite String Pops. Me and Brian...
Wow, that was a long fucking time ago.
Me and Brian loved it to death.
Dude, Tanner was on that episode.
Tanner was. Tanner is metal. June was like, this is good. I like this. But
Tanner thought it was mid.
Yeah. June wasn't too crazy about the lyrics, or it wasn't like blown away by them. But in hindsight, I still don't necessarily agree with that take, just because because like some of the other metal we've listened to, I feel like Acid Bath really do some eyebrow raising stuff, but it never gets to the point where it's like offensive or anything. Like we talked about in the review, it's like watching a horror movie. Where you're excited about the deaths and the gore.
We did
and stuff.
Mental Funeral. Mental Funeral is definitely more grotesque.
I disagree. I think Acid Bath just blows them out of the water in terms of like just eye widening. Like wow.
So to go ahead and break into it, I kind of agree with that in a way, but I think it's because it's more important. And this record kind of made me realize that, because this album is less heavy and the songs are just as long but more dynamic.
Yeah.
There are more passages where Dax is doing sort of a, me and Chaz talked about this leading up to it. I mean, there kind of is like a little there's some Eddie Vedderisms on here in his voice, but I think he takes it in a direction that makes it unique. It's not like a total ripoff. It's definitely like I feel like it's more gothic is the way to describe it. Yeah. It's like a darker tone. And because of that, the lyrics on this stuck out to me so much more and actually endeared themselves to me. Okay. And actually came off as like pretty deep poetry.
Okay.
As in that totally, I need to go back and listen to the first one because I want to know how I see that now, because the quieter, more gothic vocal performances on this really emphasize the dark thoughts and like depressive thoughts, I think, that are coming through in the lyrics and how these words are expressing certain feelings in Dax, especially on songs like Venus Blue.
Yeah.
On this record. I think that was a huge change in optics for me on this band.
So that we had that discussion, and obviously, we had to talk about their second album. And again, for those who don't know, the only reason that they didn't make any more music is because their bass player unfortunately passed away in 1997, a year after this album was released, which is such a shame because I'll get into my thoughts on this album. The potential for what they could have done in years forward, it just gone, which really, really sucks. So, Paegan Terrorism Tactics. More sludge metal, but and more genre blending, just like the first one, but we got different genres in like sludge metal.
Yeah.
And the first one we had sludge metal. doom
lot of
metal.
the blues behind. Like there was a lot more blues influence on that first record in retrospect, like blues rock, and on this one it's kind of all gone in favor of a more 90s
we have more of like a
sound.
southern metal thing going on here with some and
Really?
some stoner metal.
I thought stoner metal in particular. Okay, that's
The
different.
first
Southern
one,
metal.
the
would
first
make me
one
think
had
kind of
like
blues, too.
death metal, some doom metal on it, and it was way more heavier. And as Brian mentioned, this one kind of takes some of that away. So,
There's still a lot of heavy songs.
do I like
mean,
this record? Not really. I like some of it. I like some of it. Honestly, how Brian, not as strongly, but as Brian felt about Keyboard Fantasies is how I feel about this album. I was really disappointed for a lot of different reasons. I'll save my thoughts for later, but just there's more of what was on the first record, but in a more different direction as far as musically and tone wise goes. There's not a whole lot of like, corpse fucking on this one as there was in the the debut.
I'm gonna get fucking demonetized, even though we're not monetized.
So, June and Brian, what you guys
demonetized.
think of Acid Bath's post grunge release? What do you guys think?
It's not a post-grunge release.
It's not post grunge.
Okay,
come on.
I know it's not technically post grunge, but think about it. It's grungy as shit, and it was released in 1996. Grunge is dead.
Okay,
Grunge
so
is fucking dead.
definitely this
Tinfoil
record.
Hat is on. I have a whole I have a whole fucking chart to show you my findings.
You have like a fucking Pepe Silvia like chart behind you, basically.
I know it's not post grunge. I'm kind of memeing here, but like legitimately, I'll go and say this. I hate how fucking Dax like channels his Eddie Vedder and Kurt Cobain on this record like multiple times. It's so distracting because there's none of that on the first one. There's none of that. There's none of that. So, but anyway, I'll save my thoughts for later. What do you guys think?
What I liked about this album a lot is that it got a bit more intense musically and vocally. I think there are more like harsh vocals on this record. And I think that the just general sound of the album like is just a bit more intense at times. You don't have the melodic moments like you did on When the Kite String Pops, like there's only like one song here that has an acoustic guitar on it or a not a heavy guitar on it.
Yeah.
It's just a little more angry, I feel like, just sonically. I'm not sure lyrically if it's any more or less angry than the first one, but for me, just sonically, it's a bit more pounding, which I like.
As Brian mentioned, it's more poetic. It's way more poetic on this one than it was on the first one.
June, something you said earlier in the week when we talked about, I was like, I think this one's less heavy than the first one. I think I misinterpreted you. The heavier moments on this one are heavier, are way more intense, and I think are angrier than the last ones. Like
I mean, there's a lot of like screamed vocals.
And like what he's saying as well. And those, I love the way this album's arranged. I love that it's really front loaded with these kind of dynamic, grotesque, and I think really depressive ballads. Not ballads so much, but more ballady than what they were doing. Like the passages kind of evolve here. He'll scream a vocal every now and again. The guitar's intensity will change. There's more adventurous arrangements. Like Grave Flower is a perfect example with like the screaming guitars over top of the riffing towards the back end of that track is actually like kind of beautiful. With a lot of tracks on here, because Dax has dialed back on screaming all the time, it means when he does scream, and because it is more aggressive, it sticks out even more. And the way the tracks are arranged, with the first half having less of that, and then a series of tracks starting around Locust. What's that song called? Around
Locust Swarm.
Locust spawning or swarming, yeah. Whatever it is, there's locusts. Around there is where you get a lot more intense tracks. 13 Fingers is kind of that way too. And then just like in that myriad of intense moments, we do get two calmer songs with one of my favorite cuts on the whole record, New Dead Feeling, and another one of my favorite cuts, Dead Girl, at the back half of the very last song. So yeah, the arrangements made the songs, I think, really enhanced by the way they kind of go into one another and the way that the tone changes. When you listen to a song like the second track on this album, Bleed Me an Ocean, and you really start to listen to what Dax is talking about, he's not necessarily covering new ground. He's kind of talking about how, he's just talking about the cycle of like life and death, but the way he talks about it is just so morbid and kind of like, I guess, carnal. is
Gothic's a great way to describe it. It's not gothic rock or anything, but
well, gothic is like the vibe, but like when I think it's very much he's going in that direction because it's drab and like apathetic, you know, and that's how he kind of is describing like life and death. There's a song on it might be Dead Girl. I think it's Dead Girl because that song is kind of story-esque where he's talking about drilling into the dust of this dead woman's skull and he can't find her soul. Like that's really the ethos of the feelings on this record. I think once I started to see it that way, it totally changed a song like Venus Blue with like him talking about I peel my scalp back for you. I think he just equates a lot of these like human emotions to just raw flesh and blood, and not in a way that's uniting the two, but that is coldly separating them and really only identifying one as real. You know, these grotesque murder lyrics and these depictions of like flayed human bodies and stuff like that. Or you know, I guess another way to put it is like the lyrics on here just are less gross to me and more just kind of eye-wideningly and shockingly sad. Like on, I think it's on Venus Blue where he says, I'm sweating this blackness and shitting this cold death. Like it's just a haunting moment to me, honestly. I didn't see the lyrics that way on the first record. You know what I mean? Like when we talked about it, it's just like, this is pretty intense. I like the bluesy influences, like clearly the Louisiana, you know, them being from Louisiana matters. Like it's very much you know, not that the blues are exclusive to Louisiana, but the blues are kind of a Southern sound. With those influences gone and this new emphasis on the lyrics themselves, I don't know, it just kind of like revealed a new layer to the band to me, and that's why I love this record so much. I think I can honestly say I like it more than the debut because they just really evolved. You know, even though there's similarities, they really did kind of forge a new way forward on this album by putting more emphasis on what's being said and how it's being said and what is the atmosphere around what's being said. Because the more intense tracks are definitely the more just like misanthropic and violent and aggressive, you know, just kind of like these releases. But when he gets into a song like New Dead Feeling, or even the song, can't remember which one, where he's like dying felt so goddamn good today, you know, even though that was the opener, more dry.
The opener.
Yeah. Even
Paegan
though that one's
song.
more, even though that one's more driving, like, you know, because he's not screaming so much, you really get time to soak it in. And I don't know, I just feel like it made me see what the lyrics are really mean or what they're really conveying, you know. That was just, I know I've said that a few times, but it was a huge deal in me falling in love with this record. So I don't know, I don't want to repeat myself too much more, but I love this album. I thought it was really great. It's the best metal record we've listened to for the show that I didn't, you know, that wasn't a pick of mine that I already had.
I think that while I do appreciate that it gets a bit heavier than the first record, I think that for the runtime that it has, it gets a little bit samey in the dynamic department. And like I mentioned before, the issues that I have with the first Acid Bath record are still present on this record. I'm not in love with this, but I'd say I'm about where I'm at with When the Kite String Pops. It's a really good record. It's a really strong sludge metal record that for a number of reasons I'm not in love with.
Okay, so fuck all that. I don't. God damn it. Okay.
So like, what did you? Okay, so what about the change in direction did you dislike?
Well, I don't like the grunge elements on this. I think it really just.
Oh. I'm glad you said that because it is a more 90s record. It definitely feels more of its environment, of its time, you know, than
like
the first
the
one.
96 on this is so apparent. I mean, okay, so everything that I like is conflicting. So let me just run it down. The production is great, and I think the instruments sound awesome, but it's too fucking clean compared to the last one. I mean, the sludge on the first one was like mud, fucking caked in mud. It was sludgy. The bass and guitar sounded so ugly on the first one, and now it's like a cat compared to a lion, man. I really think they cleaned up the wrong things on here.
I thought that it definitely sounded less death metal. The drums still sound awesome to me, but I definitely kind of agree with that take that it's more put together.
And Dax gives a powerful performance, but he's trying way too hard to be any better. I mean, dead ass on fucking Greyflower and Venus Blue. This man sounds like Kurt Cobain. Like 100% like Kurt Cobain. Like he's doing his best impression of him. And it was so distracting.
Like on the first record, his voice, he sings the same way. And like, I can't believe he didn't fucking catch that shit.
I don't think so. And maybe that's because the music was more groggier.
Well, there's more screaming as well. Like the quieter moments
but he got melodic on that one as well, and it sounded like Dax. It didn't sound like Dax. I think
it was because it was more sparingly and it stuck out more. Maybe. I think it still sounds the same.
Well, maybe it's also because the music on here sounds like a grunge album. Like maybe
I mean, there's different influences in the instruments too.
Yeah.
Like it is similar to the last one, but I think there's I don't know. I think a lot has changed on this record.
I think
honestly.
So too. And I don't think for the better.
Right. When you listen to it though, you wouldn't necessarily pick up on that. Like you would think it, you know what I mean? Because at a surface level, it's similar.
The
but
more
I feel like
listens,
there's a lot of subtlety.
Just the more listens, the more I realize this does not sound like the last record, and that could be good for you or bad for you. I don't think it just. And again, I hate to say that because Dax does bring it on this record, like more so than on the last one. I think. There are some decent riffs, but again, the lack of sludginess really. Like that, I mean, shit, Tranquilized on the first one, I'm still like, God damn, what a riff.
Look, that's like one of their best fucking songs. I mean, you can't just whip that shit out. I kind of get what you're saying. Like, that would be one of my complaints, I guess. It's hard for me to just be so enraptured with some qualities, but I should mention, like, I kind of agree, like, on the more intense tracks, sometimes it feels like they're treading water a little bit, or like, we've been here, it's not that, you know, and because those other, like, bluesier and, like you said, the production's a little bit different, sometimes it kind of doesn't help the tunes.
And it doesn't help that the genre blending we had on the first one is changed again. Where on the first one we had
I missed the most.
Yeah, we had some death, some doom, helped so much for the sound. Here, like the grunge and southern metal is like brings this to I don't. Well, that gets me to the other thing. The pacing is actually better than the first one. Believe it or not. After you skip the 16 fucking minutes of silence, that pissed me off so much.
It's not. I mean, you got to think. Look. Here, I can explain it to you in like 4 seconds.
It's part of
It's on the album's on CD. Like, there's not like it's probably on CD. Like you look at it and you see the track time running. There's just like a little creepy poem at the end. The last song is "Dead Girl." Like,
I know.
That's
I'm
when
just expressing the anger that probably some poor soul probably felt when he bought this album on CD and realized that there was 16 minutes left on this song, but he couldn't.
No. They probably didn't advertise the length of the song on the back at the time. They probably just put like "Dead Girl," put like, I think it's like a 6-minute runtime or something, and then just let the silence.
Here's
probably
the
something
thing.
like that.
In this day and age, just cut it. Just get to the poem. I mean, that's literally what I did after second beyond listens. Is that
I only listened to the poem once because once I realized it wasn't a song, I didn't necessarily care.
I listened to the poem every time because it felt like a good stamp. But I'll get the lyrics are poetic, and they're way more poetic than they were on the first one. Where the first one, but I don't know if I like that because they're way more cryptic this time around and inconsistent.
Really, I thought they were more easy to interpret this time.
I disagree hard.
But then again, like I said, I didn't get to revisit the first one. Right, I haven't kind of relooked.
The first one had a clear concept with its album cover and titles and everything, and was just more to the point with it. Like, it did get poetic, like on Dr. Seuss's Dead, which is clearly the thesis statement of what that record is trying to do.
Now that you talk about it, it's kind of helped, like, making me remember, like, that album is mostly like misanthropic through the lens of like a Gacy, through the lens of like a psychopath.
Yeah. Here though, but I don't know what we're trying to get across here with the fucking album cover, which is nothing compared to the fucking rabbits pulling what I presume to be Jesus out of an Easter egg. Well, kind of wacky. What is the message here? What is the...
That is Jesus. I thought that Easter egg was like a poncho.
Pulling him right out.
So you have these rabbits with this Mexican dude, and just something creepy's going on. I don't know.
This poor Spanish man. Dude, that is Jesus. I'm so stupid. And he's got like a tortilla in his hair. Oh no, that's a rabbit's wing. This is a tough album cover.
Yeah, but like, and they got like marionettes, so clearly something's trying to be said, just like the first one. But I don't think it's gotten across. And while I do think the album gets beautifully poetic at times, I'm just so like disappointed by the sound and everything.
I mean,
and Dax's vocal performance.
pretty heavy into drug use. It looks like this is something I learned after the fact when we listened to the first album, and that you know, them using a lot of these drugs are quite influential to the music they were making. For example, on Paegan, Terrorism,
The
Tactics,
stoner
this
metal
supposed
is
to be like a
hardcore,
first.
yeah.
Well, but the stoner metal can be like kind of cheesy in that regard too. Like look at like Sleep's like Dope Smoker, where the lyrics are about like this weed caravan traveling across a desert, and then like you have like Electric Wizard, which is just like weed's badass as fuck, you know?
Yeah.
But with this, like the perspective the drugs are giving are like Paegan, Terrorism, Tactics, like I was saying, is apparently like a firsthand account of a disassociative drug they use, which is makes it part of the trip is you feel like you're dying.
Yeah.
And that's kind of informing the lyrics. And
I mean, the
feel
line
like,
"dying felt so good today" is a good line. That's a great
like it's
opening
actually
line.
worrisome. Like it feels like Dax is like chasing death, you know, through this drug use. Like it's fucking horrifying when you think about it.
So then we get these two poems. Now, I listen to the final poem every time, so I'll save that one for last. The first poem, so the poems are kind of amazing in a what the fuck is this doing here?
Oh,
But
you mean Old Skin? Fuck
Yeah, Old Skin
that was
and
the interlude.
But in hindsight, they're cringy as shit. It really is like, what happened creatively to this band? Because
I think Old Skin is kind of like a nod to the drug use. Like it's,
Maybe.
I mean, they're very much like doing like shaman-esque, like we eat the skin of the old man type.
But this
you know, it's
fucking
very
last
weird.
poem has like unga bunga drums, and I'm like, this is the third fucking time. I'm not doing this on purpose.
Bunga drums.
This is the third fucking time I've picked an album that has like a caveman-esque aesthetic ending to it. I don't know why this keeps happening. The first one being Aphex Twin Richards D. James album. The second one being the SpongeBob album. And now this fucking Acid Bath record. I'm not doing this on purpose. And I'm kind of scared right now. Because
there's some strange parallels on the show. I don't know, man. I
can see why you love it, Brian. And that's great. I mean, I made the list already, which is awesome. But I really miss what we accomplished on the first one because I was just hoping for more of that. And it's there, but it's like in a shadow of its former self, man. It really is disappointing. I'm going to go with a strong 6. I liked some of it, but goddamn, it's like nothing compared to the first one. Absolutely nothing.
I don't know. I would have to go with like a decent strong 8. Like I fucking love this thing. I think it's every bit as good, if not better than the debut. It's just, I don't know. It just made me look at the band in a different light, and that enhanced the experience so much. Not to mention, it's arranged better and is more dynamic. And
it is paced better.
Lyrically, it's just so much more. They really
fixed the pacing issue of the first one. I'll give them that.
One point I want to make real quick. Like, I love folk music, and I love like folksters who like tell stories. Like one of my favorite folk songs is the Stranger Song by Leonard Cohen. Like it's kind of, you know, it's telling a story. It has this really mystical thing. And I know that the people who take folk or even like country music in a more gothic and dark direction is typically like to me, it is kind of like, it doesn't appeal to me on a whole lot of levels. Like it's not really what I go to that genre for. But like a song like Dead Girl Here and the Baby Doll song on the first one totally kind of changed my perspective on that, because when you put the lyrics of this album in the context of that sound, it's just like, I don't know. I think Dead Girl is just as poetic as any like Dylan song. Like it's just so much darker and more depressive, and it's just coming from a different angle.
Well, that's crazy because we had a commenter. Shout out if you're listening. I don't remember the YouTube comment's name. You could find it though. We
will call you Bagunga. That will be their name.
They were like, I appreciate you comparing, like holding up to the same pedestal Acid Bath to Bob Dylan. Not a lot of people would do that. So which is why we love doing the show, is because we don't give a shit about the genres. We will talk about anything.
Well, it's also like people will run into problems when like they're rating movies or music, because it's like they'll say like, well, I love this, they'll love a movie like Airplane, and they'll love like, let's say like The Shining, and they're like, I don't know how to say how do I rate those movies because I love them both, but they're so different. Dude, if to me, I don't have that problem. It's like, you can have like a Weird Al album be as awesome as any fucking Dylan release or something if you really feel that way.
Exactly.
That's kind of how it is to me.
All right, June, what's your score?
Oh, thank you, Bunga, for the nice comment.
Thank you, Bunga.
With a decent 7. I don't have a whole lot more to say. It's a really strong record.
The next one is a regular episode. We just pick whatever we want. Any artist, you can't pick something you picked before, so I guess there are some limits. But I think I'm going to go with the newest Sons of Kemet album, Blank to the Future. I don't think June's gave it a lot of listens yet. It's a jazz album. Sons of Kemet is a modern jazz outfit. They have kind of a unique lineup. I think they have like 2 tubas, so it's just kind of it's different to my ears as like a kind of a jazz novice.
Let's go with a June core classic. The 1984 new wave record "Sleep It Off" by Christina. I'm going like this is like season 1 June core type stuff.
Oh shit! Okay, it's time to go back to our ever-changing journey into the genre of vaporwave. At this point, the journey is just educating Brian, because I love how Brian's just like, I'm not sure if I get this vaporwave on our St. Pepsi discussion. So I realized we're at a point where vaporwave's been around long enough that a lot of subgenres and have been coming out. So I figured I think Brian said it best, where it's like, let's not focus on specific artists. Let's just go through the genres of to explore the whole genre as a whole. I think that's a smart move. However, when that new Macintosh Plus drops, we're all covering that. That needs to be talked about. That's a huge, I'm so excited for that record. We talked about True Vaporwave with Macintosh Plus, Floral Shop, and we talked about Future Funk with St. Pepsi. We are going to dive into some Dream Punk. Now, Dream Punk is essentially like vaporwave, but with a way more ambient. Now, I know we've been really on the ambient hinge, and I know I'm not making any things better with that, but I figured this would be an interesting one to talk to. And I honestly, for the first time ever, I really don't kind of know what I'm getting into. So I kind of went a bit tourist core with some of these choices, but I think you'll all like this pick. We are going to do 2814, the collaborative project between HKE and Telepath Telepathy, their album Tarashi Hi no Tanjo.
Oh, I've heard that's a fucking great album.
Mm-hmm.
That's ambient, a really, really good
Dream
album.
Punk and Vaporwave. So this is our next step into the Vaporwave journey. But this time we're focusing more on the Dream Punk scene of Vaporwave. It's a 67-minute album, super ambient. I've never heard it. I don't know anything about this, but I know Jude's heard it. But it's bolded, which is crazy. So this is kind of our
one of the most well-known vaporwave albums out there. I mean, it's got almost 9,000 ratings.
But I'm picking it for the Dream Punk angle of it. That's the reason I'm picking this one. So
I had actually considered choosing this album as well at some point. So
this is our next journey into the vaporwave landscape. So hopefully Brian will put on his thinking cap this time and not be such a grandpa about it.
I'm a boomer sympathizer. This has been Unwarranted Music Opinions. I was joined by Chaz Jenkins.
Yep.
And June Lindberg.
Goodbye.
And I'm Brian Courtney. We'll see you next time around the bend. We'll see you. Goodbye. See you. See you around. Get out of here.